Welcome, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining me for this explainer today. We are taking a definitive look at the mid-2026 market pulse of the body art industry. We're going to completely strip away the anecdotes and look purely at the raw data. We are setting the stage for a really deep dive into the massive financial scale of this industry, but we'll also be uncovering some truly hidden clinical realities that every single studio operator, supplier, and consumer should absolutely know. Halfway through 2026, this industry sits right at this fascinating intersection of steady market growth, evolving regulations, and a maturing body of clinical safety data. So get ready, because we're about to look at some numbers that might just completely change how you view this entire space. Okay, let's dive into this. Before we even get to the macro data, I really want to challenge your assumptions right out of the gate. Which do you actually think is a bigger global business? Tattoos or piercings? Take a second, think about it. Because tattoos are so incredibly visible, and because pop culture focuses on them so heavily, most of us immediately assume the tattoo industry is the undisputed financial heavyweight of body art, right? Well, let's look at what the actual market pulse tells us. Bam! $8.15 billion. That massive valuation is the size of the global piercing jewelry market as of 2024. Just let that number sink in for a moment. This instantly establishes the incredible, mind-blowing economic scale of the piercing space. We aren't just talking about a niche subculture anymore. We are talking about an $8 billion global economic powerhouse. And this brilliantly illustrates the stark financial reality of the market. You have that towering, piercing market at $8.15 billion, standing right next to the $2.04 billion global tattoo market from 2023. Now, to be fair, the tattoo market is certainly not standing still. It's actually growing at a really rapid 9.87% compound annual growth rate, and it is charging toward $3.93 billion by 2030. That growth is being heavily driven by widespread cultural normalization, huge expansion in the Asia-Pacific region, and a rapidly rising demand for cosmetic and medical tattooing, things like areola reconstruction and scar camouflage. But even with that rapid growth, the sheer volume of the piercing market just totally dwarfs it. Seeing that contrast almost always prompts the exact same technical question from people. Why is the piercing jewelry market so much larger than the tattoo market? I mean, if a full sleeve tattoo costs thousands of dollars and a simple ear piercing might only cost $50, how on earth do the financials tip so heavily in favor of piercings? Let's pivot from the pure numbers and look at the underlying business mechanics driving them. The answer really comes down to a somewhat counterintuitive economic reality: recurring revenue. A tattoo is largely a single procedure purchase. You pay the artist for their time and the ink, and honestly, once it's healed, the transaction is totally over. Piercings, on the other hand, generate ongoing jewelry spend over years and years. You pay for the initial piercing, sure, but then you pay for downsizing the post as it heals, you pay for replacements when things get lost, and you pay for material switches as your personal aesthetic changes over time. Because of this recurring consumer spending, this specific market is projected to scale to nearly $11 billion, $10.89 billion to be exact, by 2032. It's the gift that keeps on giving for businesses. So, where exactly is all that ongoing piercing spend actually going? Let's break it down by product type. The ear segment absolutely dominates the market. It accounts for roughly half the total market, represented here as a massive 48% slice. The nose segment follows at about 27%, which basically leaves a quarter of the market for literally all other body jewelry combined. So the true financial engine of the piercing industry, it's entirely driven by what people are putting in their ears. All right, part one, industry structure and demographics. When we start looking at the raw demographics driving those billions of dollars, a few absolute standouts emerge. First up, cultural saturation. Did you know 32% of US adults have a tattoo? And what's even more fascinating is that 22% actually have more than one. Yet despite that massive consumer base driving $1.3 billion in US industry revenue, the industry itself is incredibly fragmented. There are over 23,000 US tattoo businesses. Think about that. There are no dominating corporate chains monopolizing the space. It is heavily independent. We also see that 14.4% of US adults aged 18 to 50 have a non-earlobe piercing. And please, note that 11.4% general population prevalence for nickel allergy. Keep that specific number tucked in your back pocket, because it is about to become very, very important. Just before we move on from the business side, I want to briefly contrast that fragmented U.S. landscape with the United Kingdom. While the U.S. is highly decentralized across those 23,000 independent businesses, they at least have a tally. The UK tattoo industry has absolutely zero central tally or national database, none. Instead, businesses are just licensed piecemeal by local authorities under the Local Government Act of 1982. It really goes to show just how varied the fundamental structure of this global market truly is. Let's move to and see how this builds into part 2, the hidden clinical cost. Okay, we've spent some time looking at the immense financial health and the structure of this market, but now it is time to pivot and explore the physical health side. With a market footprint this incredibly large, we absolutely have to look closely at the hidden clinical realities and the safety outcomes tied to this booming industry. To understand the clinical side, we need to ground ourselves in exactly what nickel allergy is. By definition, it is the single most common contact allergen in the industrialized world. As we noted on that demographics table a second ago, it has an 11.4% general population prevalence. However, that pooled prevalence actually masks a very steep gender gradient, and the data is crystal clear on this. Body piercings are the dominant driver of this allergic sensitization. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how this translates from really complex medical data into a stark, everyday reality. A massive recent meta-analysis of over 25,000 patients found an odds ratio of 5.9 for nickel allergy with piercings and an etiological fraction of 82%. If we strip away all that medical jargon, it leaves us with this staggering, plain English reality. 4 out of 5 nickel allergy cases in the general population would simply not exist without piercing exposure. 4 out of 5. And the clinical story goes way beyond just nickel. If we look at the broader overview, roughly 23% of non-earlobe piercings develop a complication that requires some form of actual medical intervention. That is nearly a quarter of all non-earlobe piercings. Turning over to tattoos, in a referred hospital cohort of tattoo complication patients, allergic reactions dominated at 37%, followed by bacterial infections at 11%. Now, it's absolutely vital to remember here that a hospital cohort is a highly selected population, meaning they are already actively seeking medical help, so those high rates aren't generalizable to everyone getting a tattoo. Across multiple general studies, the actual general tattoo infection rate is estimated to be much, much lower, sitting comfortably somewhere in the 0.5 to 6% range. Which brings us to part 3. Does regulation actually work? With literally billions of dollars changing hands and millions of clinical complications occurring, we have to ask the ultimate question: does regulation actually work? Can government guardrails successfully tame this massive, multi-billion-dollar market and actually improve safety? To answer that, we can impartially compare 2 very different regulatory frameworks. On one side, you have the European Union, which takes a highly proactive, centralized approach through the EU Nickel Directive, established way back in 1994, which was tightened even further by REACH limits. On the flip side, the United States takes a heavily fragmented approach. While all 50 states do regulate tattooing in some form, there is absolutely no federal framework governing tattoo ink ingredients or jewelry nickel content. The U.S. relies purely on a basic OSHA bloodborne pathogen standard, which really just provides a workplace safety floor rather than regulating the actual materials going into the consumer's body. Well, the data shows that a centralized approach works wonders. Looking at the timeline, if we take young European women, who are historically the highest risk demographic, nickel allergy prevalence dropped from roughly 19.8% in pre-directive cohorts all the way down to 11.4% in post-directive estimates. This single piece of regulation effectively cut nickel sensitization in the highest risk demographic almost perfectly in half. It is a brilliant, undeniable example of how policy can tangibly change physical health outcomes on the ground. So the crucial point is, regulation absolutely works, but there is a major, major caveat, and that is the enforcement gap. Despite 3 decades of these highly successful laws being on the books, a shocking 24.7%, literally 1 in 4 earrings sold in Europe today, still exceeds the legal regulatory nickel release limit. It's almost hard to believe, right? The law clearly worked where it was enforced, but policing a fragmented, massive global supply chain has proven incredibly difficult. The enforcement gap remains the single biggest challenge to public health in this entire industry. Which leaves us with this final, truly provocative thought. We are looking at a combined global market that is rapidly approaching $12 billion, and it's riddled with massive enforcement gaps. If you are a studio operator or a consumer, are you relying on fragmented state laws to keep you safe, or are you surviving on traceable materials certification? Because when the government guardrails fail, traceable certification is really the only defense that survives contact with a client. I hope this market pulse has brought some real clarity and structure to how you view the industry. I highly encourage you to go explore the full safety statistics dataset for yourself to learn more. Thanks for learning with me on this explainer, and stay curious.